Woke. You know, it's a simple four-letter word that can just ignite a firestorm online, at the dinner table, pretty much anywhere. But how did we get here? How did a word that's supposed to be about awareness become a battleground? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into that exact question, unpacking what the source material calls the woke paradox.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll trace the journey of the word woke itself. Then, we'll dive right into the heart of the debate, looking at both sides. After that, we'll explore the paradox, this idea that there might be some surprising common ground. And finally, we'll look at a possible path forward.
All right, first up, the evolution of woke. Because really, to get a handle on this whole conflict, you have to understand the word's incredible journey. How it went from a simple call for awareness to, well, a cultural weapon.
So, where did this all start? Woke actually has its roots in African-American vernacular English. The phrase, stay woke, was a powerful call for vigilance, a reminder within the Black community to stay alert to the very real dangers of systemic racism and social injustice. It wasn't a trend, it was born from a need for awareness and even survival.
And the way this word traveled is just fascinating. You can find it in Black protest literature way back in the mid-20th century, but it really exploded into the public consciousness around 2014, becoming a rallying cry for the Black Lives Matter movement. From there, it just took off, entering the mainstream and expanding to cover all sorts of social justice issues. And now, here in the 2020s, it's a full-blown flashpoint in the global culture war. What a journey for one little word.
Okay, so now let's get into the thick of it. The debate on two fronts. This is where we see how the word woke wasn't just adopted by different groups, it was actively reframed and, you could say, weaponized by opposing sides.
This quote from Douglas Murray really captures the intensity of the critical perspective. He's not just describing an idea, he's framing wokeness as this rigid, religious-like ideology, complete with its own sins and punishments. And that view is absolutely central to the anti-woke side of the argument.
So what we have are two completely different visions of the world clashing. On one side, you have the progressive or pro-woke view. This side prioritizes social justice and equity and sees woke as a necessary tool to fight oppression. But on the other side, you've got the conservative or anti-woke view. For them, the priority is individual responsibility and free speech, and they see woke as an ideology that's gone way too far and is just creating more division. They're just operating from two fundamentally different playbooks.
And this is where things get really complicated, where good intentions can lead to some pretty intense clashes. Think about the whole Latinx debate, a term created for inclusion that a majority of the community it's meant to describe actually rejected, or arguments that traditional math teaching is racist. Then you have these fierce debates over cultural appropriation and the push for language like birthing people instead of mothers. These are the flashpoints where those progressive ideals have sparked massive controversy.
So all of this division brings us to the core idea of this explainer. The woke paradox. Because what if, and this is a big what if, beneath all that anger and hostility, both sides are actually fighting for some of the very same things? It seems impossible, right? I mean, with a divide that runs this deep, that feels so personal for so many people, is common ground even a possibility? Let's see what the analysis suggests. Okay, first point of connection, a shared desire for justice. Now, their ideas of what justice looks like might be on opposite ends of the universe, but both sides genuinely believe they are fighting for a more fair and just society. It's not the what they disagree on, it's the how.
And then there's a shared concern for rights. You know, the anti-woke side champions free speech above all else, while the pro-woke side often prioritizes freedom from harm and discrimination. The emphasis is different, for sure, but that core value, the belief that individual rights must be protected, is there on both sides.
And finally, believe it or not, there's a shared vision for opportunity. Both sides want a world where people can get ahead and succeed. They just fundamentally disagree on the best way to make that happen. Is it through systemic reform, or is it through individual grit and initiative? The destination is pretty similar, even if they're taking completely different roads to get there. So, if this common ground actually exists, where do we go from here? Well, that brings us to our final section, exploring a possible path forward, a way to maybe shift from constant conflict to something a little more like collaboration. The material we're looking at suggests a few key steps for having more constructive conversations. First, and this is a big one, focus on the actual issue, not the label. Talk about the policy, not the buzzword. Second, try to cultivate some empathy, to actually understand the fears and hopes driving the other side. Third, we've got to seek out nuance and reject that easy us versus them framing. And finally, prioritize real-world outcomes that actually improve people's lives instead of just trying to score ideological points.
So what does that look like in the real world? Well, let's take social justice. The left tends to focus on systemic barriers and achieving equality of outcome. The right focuses on individual responsibility and equality of opportunity. A potential middle ground? You acknowledge that those systemic barriers are real, but you promote solutions that also empower individual agency. The focus shifts to equalizing opportunities so that meritocracy can actually function more fairly for everybody. It's not about choosing one side. It's about integrating the valid points from both.
Now here's a really interesting framework to think about all this: game theory. It's the study of strategic interaction, and it offers a whole new lens here. Instead of seeing this as a zero-sum conflict, where for me to win, you have to lose, game theory opens up the possibility of cooperation leading to better outcomes for everyone. It's about changing our mindset from a battle that has to be won to a complex puzzle that we could maybe solve together.
So really, the big takeaway here is that maybe the choice we're presented with every day, between being woke or anti-woke, is actually a false choice. The real decision we have to make is between staying stuck in this cycle of endless conflict or trying to find a way toward collaborative progress.
And that just leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question to think about. If the common ground for a better, more just society is actually there, right under the surface of all the noise, what's really stopping us from just starting there?